Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to part 2 of our series on One Clear Path for Optometrists with Lisa Jansen. Yesterday, we heard from Lisa about effective communication, particularly in times of crisis and what we're going through, and discussions around, some tricky conversations with employees and employers and the like, and that webcast will be available to review in the coming days. Today, as you can see on your screen, we're talking with Lisa about optimal strategies for physical and mental wellbeing. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we meet and acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging. Thanks for joining us again today. Before we start, I'd just like to remind everyone that today is also worth one non-clinical CPD point, and that will be automatically uploaded for you as an accredited CPD point in the coming days. So all you need to do is remain online for the duration of the webcast today. There isn't any assessment questions today, so there's nothing for you to go and look for. If you do want to go to the course page where you registered, you will also find some really, really good resources that Lisa has provided, and she'll be referring to throughout the topic and throughout the webcast, as well as the slides if you wish to go along and follow along. As usual, please send your questions in for Lisa to answer at the end, and we will have a recording of today's webcast available as well. Please ensure you sign on from individual devices as usual, and I just wanted to flag some upcoming CPD. So over the next couple of weeks, we have the Optometry 2040 Phase 2, where we have a webcast on leading you to leverage disruption. Of course, there's been a lot of disruption over the last 6 to 8 weeks with regards to the COVID-19 pandemic and beyond, and of course, the new and innovative things that are disrupting our profession constantly. And I think Optometry Australia has done a great job in trying to start the journey in leading the profession towards 2040. In addition to that, on the 9th of June, we have rural optometry during COVID-19, and I'm sure many of you will be interested in tuning into that as well. So that's sort of the 26th of May and the 9th of June. Of course, there's more beyond that. The only other thing I wanted to flag today is that we've got a lot of recent CPD modules up if you wanted to revisit any of the ones you might have missed. There's ones around emerging from lockdown, on business and practice continuity, so not only as business owners, but even as employees and locums. There's navigating HR and all the issues of surrounding HR. We did a special one on mental health and first aid around that, and there's one also on telehealth and optometry, and there's plenty more up there. I'm sure you've seen when you came to register for Lisa's series. There's plenty more up there for you to look at, so I encourage you to go and have a look at those. Now, for those of you who weren't with us yesterday, I'll very quickly introduce Lisa again today. Lisa is an optometrist in Western Australia with over 30 years experience in private practice, specialising in contact lens fittings and practice ownership. At the age of 25, she was the first female partner in a group of 7 practices, employing over 50 staff. In 1992, she was one of the first optometrists to fit ortho-K lenses, and Lisa completed her graduate certificate in ocular therapeutics in 2016. Lisa's also had board positions with Optometry Western Australia and the Optometry Registration Board. Lisa is also a professional coach, consulting with individuals and businesses. Her business, Infinite Clarity Coaching, brings together her 2 passions, clarity in vision and in life. She's fascinated by neuroplasticity and the neuroscience of behaviour change and high performance. Her coaching addresses strategies for clarity, mindset, and taking action towards success in business and in life. And she works with practice owners and as well as their teams to deliver outcomes that provide the highest level of care to their patients. And I'm sure if you attended yesterday's webcast, you'll agree with me that Lisa's advice is invaluable, particularly when it comes to these areas around sort of practice development as well as growth mindset. And I believe that Lisa will be talking to us about that today. So I'll hand over to Lisa. Afternoon, Lisa.
Hi, Simon. Thank you very much for the introduction, and to anybody who was here yesterday. So thank you for coming again, and for new people, hopefully there'll be a lot that you're able to take home and use from today. So disclaimer up front is that I'm not a psychologist, I am an optometrist, and as Simon said, that I work as a coach. And psychology is a lot about looking into the past, about things that have happened that, create who we are now and some of our thoughts and behaviours. But coaching is more a future-focused process where we work out where it is that you want to go, and we look at strategies that can help you get there. And often coaching is with really successful people, but they just want to get somewhere either a little bit faster or with less stress. So if you think about all the top sports people in the world, they all have a coach. No matter how good they are, they still have somebody to help keep them on track and support them along the way. So for me, the journey has been really a lifelong journey in terms of being interested in wellbeing. And I think around the age of, I think it must have been 20 or 21 in my final year of uni, I remember going to the GP and I was getting headaches, and we worked out it was because I was grinding my teeth. I think it was during exam period. And, she talked a little bit about stress and introduced me to the idea that there could be a connection between stress and what's going on in the body. And this was the late 80s, so it seems obvious now, but that was still a reasonably new idea at those times. It had only just been around for probably since the late 70s. And she suggested things like yoga and meditation. And I remember going to my first yoga class and thinking it was the most boring thing I'd ever done, because I was into running and eventually was doing triathlons, and I loved the adrenaline of those sorts of sports. So it's been a long time for me going through this process and looking and studying the neuroscience of happiness, high performance, success, and coming full circle to finally the things I love most are meditation and yoga now. So it's interesting how 30 years down the track things can change. But that's just a little bit about me and my connection to this work, which some people think that's strange. Why, you're an optometrist, where did this come from? And it didn't come from nowhere. It's been a parallel pathway, let's say. So when we talk about well-being, I want to just put the concept here that well-being is something that is a journey as well, and a lifelong one. It's not a destination that you get to. You don't do something and you get there. It's something that you have to work on. And sometimes you need to work on it more than others because you find that there are things affecting you. But just remember, it's small things that we do every day that make a difference. It's not just one big thing, which people often think, I'll just do this one thing and everything will change. It's not that. It's the small things that we do every day. So what we're going to look at today is really what well-being is, and particularly how stress affects well-being, because during the COVID crisis, stress has been a big factor that has affected everybody at the same time in the world. And how can we improve well-being? So we know some things, but sometimes we don't know the real impact. And sometimes we underestimate how much a small thing, as I said, can do in your overall well-being. And we will talk about some strategies for optimal physical well-being and mental well-being. And although these things are separated, what I want to show you today is there's actually a really big connection between your physical well-being and your mental well-being, and the other way around as well. So they're not really separate things. They both are quite interconnected in this sort of mind-body connection. So I'd like you to just be curious today. So my invitation is to be curious. And as I speak, be on the lookout for things that you think, how could this work for me? It's easy to reject things and say, oh, that doesn't apply to me and it's got nothing to do with me. But I'm just going to invite you to be curious and just listen in that way to the presentation today and just see what you come away with. So I'm just going to get started on a poll quite quickly so that I can just gauge a feel for where you are. And I'd like you to just rate on a scale of 1 to 10 how you would rate your overall well-being levels at the moment. So,
and Lisa, I will just jump in, sorry, and say that these polls are all anonymous. So feel free to vote comfortably, knowing that nobody knows what you're voting on.
And so I've just put a little scale there, which really means, you don't feel that it's great at present. Look, it's okay, but I think it could be better. And the top one is, of course, I'm feeling good. I feel like I'm thriving and flourishing and everything's fine. So if you could just put your answers in there as quickly as you can, and Simon will give me the results when they're available.
There you go, Lisa.
Okay, so that's great. So it looks like the majority of people are in the middle, which is what we'd probably expect. That, look, it's okay, it could be better. And 13% of people, really feeling that their well-being's not great, and 23% are feeling very good. So it's interesting just to see the majority of people there are just going to be somewhere in the middle. And so there's always something that we can do or look at to improve our well-being, and hopefully there'll be something today that might come up. So if we look at what well-being is, it was kind of a trick question in a way, because when I think about well-being, sometimes I think I don't even know what that means. Does that mean, am I happy? Am I feeling good? So we're going to break that down a little bit today about what well-being is. And we'll look at it in this context. It means feeling good and functioning effectively. So the functioning part is quite important. So it's how you feel and how you're working in your workplace, at home, in relationships. And well-being is having what we call the resources or the reserves to navigate the highs and lows. So the reality is life is going to throw challenges at us. If we sit here thinking, I wish my life was, nothing ever happened, it's not realistic. So firstly, if you just accept that being human and being alive, there are going to be challenges, then it's how can we negotiate and come out of those challenges in the best possible state. And there's no single element that says what well-being is. So it's a combination of physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, intellectual, and social things. So we're going to look at how these things work together as we go along today. And well-being, it's being well and doing well to achieve at work and home, which is this feeling good and functioning effectively. And it is believed that we do have natural tendencies and genetic set points when it comes to well-being. Some people are more optimistic than others. Some people are more pessimistic, and it can be partly genetic and how we're brought up, but we'll look at how we can actually influence our well-being. And why is well-being important? Well, the research shows that people with higher levels of well-being are going to be more resilient and have more energy. And that makes sense. They're going to have more resources and they're going to have something in the tank for when the resources are drained during a challenging time. They're going to be healthier and happier. So higher well-being is associated with health and happiness, more charitable and liked by others. So people with higher levels of well-being are more likely to be kind, to volunteer, and to help other people out. And in the workplace, they're also shown to be more productive and earn more money. So higher levels of well-being are associated with all of these areas that I'm sure most of us would like to be achieving. So today I'm going to look at this PERMA wellbeing model that is a model that is being proposed by Martin Seligman, and some of you may have heard of him. He's one of the leaders in positive psychology. And in 1998, which is not that long ago, when he was president of the American Psychological Association, he put together this movement to urge psychology to look beyond fixing mental illness and instead to promoting sustainable well-being. So this was quite a shift at that time, where psychology had always been about helping people who were already suffering with mental illness or depressed or having all of these other issues. And instead he said, well, how about we look at things that could help people build their well-being so that they don't end up here in the first place. And that was relatively new at that time. And so he proposed these 6 pillars and elements that come together. And the fact is that we're all different and we all have a different mix of these components. So if we look at them here, the components of the PERMA model are positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning, accomplishment, and health. And today, because this could be a workshop in itself and 6 months worth of webinars, we're just going to look mainly around the positive emotion and the health, but we'll also look at engagement and meaning as well. So these are the components that he believed were part of the wellbeing model that we're going to look at today. So they have also studied workplace wellbeing as well as personal wellbeing. And the studies have shown that people with high levels of workplace wellbeing are nearly 6 times more likely to feel engaged at work. So that's quite a significant improvement, to have 6 times more engagement than less than that. And 29% more likely to be productive, again, quite significant. 45% more likely to be satisfied with their jobs, 46% less likely to experience unhealthy days or sickness. And this one here, 125% less likely to burn out. Now, burnout is a massive topic in itself, which we won't be talking about. Stress, burnout, resilience are all things that are quite topical at the moment, and a lot of research is being put that way. So I guess what we can see, though, is wellbeing at work and personally has a big impact on our effectiveness in those environments. And the latest study, this was taken from the 2018 work, but the latest study just came out just in the last few weeks, and I've just had access to it, and it's basically still supports these statistics here. I just want to pop in and talk about happiness for a moment, because as I said, well-being and happiness are often associated, but they're not necessarily the same thing. And the work on happiness is actually quite similar to well-being, in which it shows that we do have a set point. So 50% of our happiness is genetically determined, and it's through our upbringing, through our parents, through our environment of when we grew up. That's where happiness comes from. There's 10% that comes from circumstances, and it's interesting if you've ever heard some of that research on people who win the lottery, or they get a new car, or they get a new house. Circumstantial things can make us happier, but it only accounts for 40% of our overall, 10% of our overall happiness. And the other 40% is intentional activity. So this is the part that we can actually influence. 40% of happiness is about the things that we do that we can work on, which is what we're going to look on in wellbeing. So just remember this graph if you can. 40% of happiness can be influenced by what we're doing. So we won't go too closely into the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, but when I talk about stress, I really want to just touch on the fact that we're going to be talking about that stress response, the fight, flight, all the things we probably know from our optometry studies of how the sympathetic nervous system works. So what we want to look at is how the two of them work together, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the neurochemicals of stress and how they affect the body and what we can do to calm things down. So we're just going to move on to another poll quickly here, which is just to rate your stress levels, your current stress levels. It's kind of related to what we talked about with wellbeing, but it's just a different way of asking. So again, on a scale where A is lower than usual, B same as usual, C higher than usual, and D, if you're one of the lucky ones, what's stress?
Alrighty, Lisa, the results are more or less in.
Yes.
And there you go.
Okay. So, yeah, 13% lower than usual, 40% same as usual, 46% higher than usual, and 1% the lucky person. What stress? So thank you. So I guess what we can say is about half the people are feeling that they've got a higher level of stress than normal or usual. And what I'm going to say to you, that's perfectly normal. That's exactly what we would expect at this time. So we're going to talk about what we can do about that situation to help you. So I just want to, as I said, touch on some of the neurochemicals. I love understanding why things happen and how they happen. It helps me to look at some of these strategies and techniques and understand what their influence is, both on my mind and on my body, and how they can help me. So the stress response we know is the fight, flight, sympathetic nervous system, and the chemicals are cortisone, adrenaline, and in the body, what that does, of course, is it increases heart rate, blood pressure, activates glucose to the muscles so that we can run, that we can flee, and of course, breathing increases. All of those things start to happen in the body. And then the relaxation response is the one that's also known as the rest and digest, and that's the parasympathetic nervous system. And this is related to obviously calming down, or almost the opposite of what the stress response is. And then we're going to touch on these happiness chemicals, the things that make us feel happy and how we can generate more of them for free and legally. So oxytocin, which is the hug, the love drug that you hear people talk about, dopamine, which is related to reward, serotonin makes us feel happier and calmer, and the endorphins also make us feel good. So we're going to talk and touch on some of these chemicals as we go. Not that you have to remember much, but we will talk about how they influence well-being. The first thing we're going to talk about really is just good stress. So when we think about stress, we often think of stress as being either good or bad, but stress is just part of the way our system works. So it's important for us to have some of it to get motivated so we actually do things. And if you look at this curve, which you've probably seen on numerous occasions, you can see if you don't have enough stress, the body is really feeling a bit lazy and not activated and won't do anything. There's an optimum level of stress that's in the middle of the bell curve there. And then we start to get onto this too much stress and feeling a little bit overloaded, and then we can actually end up being in burnout. And burnout is what we want to avoid, obviously, and that's where we start to drop off there. So our thoughts are the things that can actually inappropriately activate the stress response. And so it's not the tiger or the lion or the thing that we're going to be worried about that's coming from somewhere else. It's actually our own thoughts that are going to be involved usually in activating the stress response. And our body is designed to tolerate short-term stress and low levels of stress, but it can't easily return to our baseline if the stress is long-term and it just doesn't seem to have an end to it. So I just want you to think about stress and how it affects you, and understand that how you think about it can be part of what can cause the suffering. So there's a TED talk by Kelly McGonigal, and she's written a book called The Upside of Stress. And she talks about what the good things are about stress so that we can think about it in a way that some is good and having it gets us into action, but having too much for too long is obviously going to be a problem. So how does stress affect the body? Well, in our body, we feel stress physiologically as a feeling of anxiety. And so the brain, when it feels anxiety, is designed to go searching for the threat. So it's what's going on, where's the threat, what's happening. And the amygdala, which is part of that fear and stress response, creates that discomfort in our body. It actually feels physically uncomfortable when we've got anxiety. And the idea is it's forcing you to do something. It wants you to run, to flee, to take action, I suppose. So if we reframe it and we think, well, anxiety is actually a gift. Anxiety is a gift to protect us, and it's there to keep us safe. So when we're feeling anxiety, we need to take notice. So when you think about it, don't think I want to get rid of it. It's keeping you safe. So just we're going to try to work out what's going on when we feel stress, and then that's how we can reframe those feelings. The important thing about anxiety is to understand that the antidote to anxiety is control. So when you can control the threat, or you can control the response to the threat, that's when you can reduce the anxiety. So we're going to talk about strategies where we can take control or get a feeling of control so that we can reduce that anxiety that's going on in the body. So remember, it's about reframing that message. So which brings me to this great quote that I've always loved from William James, who was a psychologist from a long time ago, and saying that the greatest weapon against stress is our ability to choose one thought over another. Sometimes that feeling of helplessness where we feel there's nothing we can do and that things are out of our control, if we can just step back and get some self-awareness, we will understand that we can choose how we think about things. And we're going to look at that a little bit later when we look at the some of the mental wellbeing strategies. So distress tolerance is something that we'll talk about briefly here as well, which is getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. So when we're in a stressful situation, we are going to feel discomfort. And these feelings of anxiety, fear, sadness, guilt, shame are all uncomfortable feelings that we have. And usually when we're feeling uncomfortable, the first thing we do is we want to get rid of these feelings. We don't want to feel them anymore. And we've got ways that we numb ourselves from those, which are not very healthy habits. And distress tolerance is really about taking notice of those negative emotions and think about them as signals or signposts to actually pay attention. So they're telling you, hey, stop, look here, there's something going on. And that's a really important thing to take on board, is that knowing that the emotion is there allows you then to be able to do something about it. So the first step is self-awareness and being able to name your emotion, which if we look at this 3-step process, so name the emotion that you're feeling. I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling worried, I'm feeling scared. As soon as you do that, what you do is you create a separation, because you become the observer of understanding that this is going on, rather than feeling like I am the fear, I am the anxiety, or that it's taken over me. You take a step and say, okay, this anxiety I'm feeling in my body. And then that first step of just self-awareness allows you just to slow down so that you don't react and go, okay, I'm feeling a bit anxious about this. I wonder why I'm feeling anxious about it, or why have I been triggered? That's something that's not easy to do in the moment when you feel this high level of emotion. So whenever you do get a high level emotion, just try to take a step back if you can and try to work out where it's coming from. And most importantly, which is this concept of control, number 3, control the controllables. So stop, work out what's going on, and then work out, is there something I can do about it? And if there is, then do it. And if you can't do something about it, then you accept that that's the case. But just making that distinction and taking a step back is one of the most powerful things you can do when you feel overcome by emotion. I've got a couple of quotes here from Susan David, who's a psychologist who specialises in emotional agility. And I love the way that she talks about the normality of having emotions. And she says, research now shows that the radical acceptance of all of our emotions, even the messy, difficult ones, is the cornerstone to resilience, thriving, and true, authentic happiness. She says, when we label our emotions accurately, we are more able to discern the precise cause of our feelings. So being able to name them, know what's going on, then we work out what's happening. And this is one of her famous quotes, and she's done a great TED talk as well. She says, only dead people never get unwanted or inconvenienced by their feelings. Only dead people never get stressed and never get broken hearts and never experience the disappointment that comes with failure. She's basically saying these uncomfortable feelings are part of being alive. They're the contract that you have to have a meaningful life. So don't push everything away. Try to understand that these emotions are part of who we are. There was an explanation given to me that I really enjoyed as well, just about the mind and the body. And they say that your thoughts are the language of the brain and your feelings are the language of the body. And we don't always make the connection between our thoughts and our feelings, and yet they're intimately intertwined. And it's trying to tease away and break through that gives you a little bit of peace and a little bit of space to make some connections. So we know what well-being is, we know how stress affects it. So how do we improve well-being? Well, well-being, as I said, is really habits and things that we do on a daily basis, a weekly basis, that add up over time. And we talk about these positive interventions. The PERMA model that Martin Seligman has looks at these positive things that we can do to build these pillars to build our overall well-being. And as I said, we're going to be looking at promoting positive emotions and how we can create new habits and routines to do that. And what's important is understanding you can start with just 10 minutes a day. Just 10 minutes a day is enough to get you on the road to making a difference. But It's a bit like eating well. Just eating broccoli on one day is not enough that it's going to make you healthy. So you've got to keep doing it. And, doing exercise on one day is not enough that's going to keep you healthy as well. So we need to be doing these things on a regular basis, and just start with one or two things if you can. So we don't have to do everything at once. If you're feeling stressed already, the last thing you want to do is be adding more things to your daily list of things to do. So we're going to look at, when we talked about the neurochemicals, we're going to look at how we can affect them, I guess, by dialing up the positive ones and dialing down the negative ones. Because if we look at increasing the happiness chemicals, we'll look at the things that can do that: diet, exercise, social connection, the goals and habits that we do on a daily basis. How do we increase the relaxation response, those chemicals that elicit the relaxation response? Well, we can actually train ourselves to switch into the relaxation or that rest and digest response. And we can do it by deep breathing. That's one of the most common ways. And by eliciting the relaxation response on a daily basis, what we do is we increase resilience. And this is going to allow us to return to that state of homeostasis or balance that we want to get to when we think about that stress curve. And reducing the stress response, things like exercise, diet, and sleep. And most importantly, how about reframing our thoughts? The way we think is part of what creates our anxiety. So we can reduce it by looking at ways that we can have better ways of thinking. So we're going to be looking at dialing up and dialing down the negative. So the physical well-being strategies are probably not news to you. They're probably things that you've heard before. And exercise, sleep, diet, and things like mindfulness and meditation. And they boost the endorphins. So when we exercise, we know that the endorphins will boost our mood. They'll also help our body be healthier. So there's a connection on both levels. And we're going to look at a couple of these particularly. But one of the ones that research that I read recently was that they showed that not doing exercise was just as bad for you as smoking. So there was a study that showed that not being physically active was a massive problem, more so than even having hypertension or diabetes. So I'm not going to talk much about exercise because I think that's probably something that we know and we've done to death, and it's a matter of what you find comfortable. But what I would do is remind you the importance of it, even though you don't always think about it. Very, very important. And so we are going to focus just a little bit on sleep. So sleep, we know, is vital to good brain function. And during times of stress and anxiety, it's very common to find that you're not sleeping as well. So the judgment that we have about not sleeping well becomes part of the problem. So how do we break this cycle? So we know that it's good for us and that it boosts immunity, but there's lots of other things that are happening when you sleep as well, to your memory, to the neural networks that have happened during the day. They get pruned. So it's a really busy time when you're sleeping, and your brain actually burns more calories when you sleep than when you're awake. So anything we can do to work on that or improve that are going to have benefits to our mood, to our memory, to all the things that are going to help us do other things like exercise. Then we're going to have more motivation if we feel less tired. So limiting social media and screens before bed, again, seems really obvious, but it's one of the things that during a time of crisis, we can be on our phones a little bit more, looking out for things. Really, we've got to turn that off, and we've got to let our brain start to wind down, and having some sort of routine where you can listen to a hypnosis track, a meditation track, do some breathing, but have a good sleep routine where you start slowing down that 30 minutes before bed and start to make that part of your habit if you can. And there's so many ways that you can do that, but it's just finding what works for you. But sleep, I guess, really undermines and underpins so many parts of your well-being that it's one that's good to focus on if you can. And I heard something recently that just said When you're in a worry cycle, what you do is you tell yourself, well, okay, I will worry about that. So what your brain needs to know is that you're not going to forget, which is why it keeps reminding you. So you've got to say, it's okay, I will worry about that. And you might even have worry time. So some people put 10 or 15 minutes aside in the day so that they can write down all their worries. And then your brain doesn't start feeling anxious and keep reminding you and become hypervigilant, because it knows that you're going to be able to collect your thoughts somewhere. And as you go to sleep, you say, the most important thing that I can do right now is to sleep. My priority now is to sleep. Even if you have that mantra of saying to your brain, thank you, I haven't forgotten, and I will work on it. But the most important thing at the moment, my priority is sleep. So it's sort of taking back that control almost to this self-talk that happens in the brain. So apart from your sleep, of course, there's your diet. And you've probably seen or heard a lot about the gut brain and research that's happening along those lines. And 90 to 95% of serotonin is actually produced in the gut. And serotonin, as you know, is one of the neurochemicals in the brain that are related to our feelings of happiness. It's one of the chemicals, of course, that are used in antidepressants, the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So having serotonin is good for you. In the gut, it's not necessarily directly related to your brain health. However, we know that the gut health and your diet is a big factor in your overall well-being. So being better physically is actually going to help you with your brain health and mood as well. And the amino acids from your food are what is used to produce the serotonin in the gut. So slightly different roles in the gut to the brain, but they are connected. And as I said, in the brain, it's a big mood booster. So there's just been new research again that I've seen, and neuroscientists at the University of Pittsburgh Brain Institute have done a study that's found a pathway, a neural pathway between the brain and the gut, and it's been done in mice. So they've often found it the other way around, sort of from the gut to the brain, but it's the first time that they've found this biological mechanism that they can use. And so they're looking at the effect between stress and ulcers. So they haven't always been able to find what that neural pathway is, and they've started to find those cells and those areas that are affected. So previously, most of the evidence has been the gut microbiome and its effect and influence on the brain, but now they're finding a connection going the other way. So it's changing all the time, and they're finding out more and more. And we don't know everything that there is to know, but we are finding out with the new research. Now, the techniques for calming the nervous system, I'm not going to go a lot into that today because there are many, and it's finding the right thing for you. So there's no use telling everybody that they should do a particular type of meditation or mindfulness. So you've got to find the thing that works for you. And basically the technique that's most effective is the one that you can do and that you will do regularly. So I'll give you some ideas with breathing as we go here. But in mindfulness is just about becoming present and becoming present in the moment. And it's tuning into your body. So when we are stressed, we tend to start dissociating. So we get so caught up in the worry and the thoughts in our head that we physically become separated almost from our body, and we're not connected anymore. So connecting the two is about that presence. And through breathing, we can start to connect to our body. And that's what we're going to look at here with this relaxation response. So I do find it surprising that some of the things that we've learnt have been relatively recent. We take a lot of it for granted, but there's these people like this cardiologist, a Harvard medical practitioner, Herbert Benson, who in the 60s was one of the first people to make a connection between stress and hypertension. So he was treating people who had hypertension, and he noticed that there were certain traits or personality things about them. And it was the first time that people had actually thought that there was a connection between stress or what might be going on, or their thoughts, and what was going on in their body. And he proposed this relaxation response. And basically the relaxation response is the opposite of the stress response. So it's where our heart rate decreases, our blood pressure decreases, and our breathing rate goes down. And he was the first one to prove this sort of mind-body connection in a more medical sense. And it was groundbreaking at the time. And all of the research he's done still holds true today. And his technique was really just about connecting to the breath. And so the technique that I have found most useful is a really simple one. I call it the 2 times, or the 2x breath technique, or 2 times. And it's basically you breathe out for twice the amount of time as you breathe in, if you're counting. So you'd breathe in for 4 and then breathe out for 8. Now, at first, when you're feeling anxious, it can be hard to breathe out for 8. You feel like you've really got to push it. So you just start where you are. Start breathing in for 4, then out for 4. The next one, you can breathe in for 4, and you can breathe out for 5. And you just silently in your mind, 1, 2, 3, 4, pause, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Gradually building that to 8 on the exhalation. And if you want to, you can even just say, if you don't count, but you just start breathing in. And as you breathe out, you're just silently saying, let go. So in letting go, you're telling to your body, it's okay to let go and it's okay to relax. Beauty of this technique is it is evidence-based, so we know it works, but it's self-administered. It's something that you can do yourself every day, and it's free. And you can get started with as little as 2 or 3 minutes a day. So personally, I would use this technique myself, particularly between patients. So if I'm having a really busy day, which usually they all are, I'm always fully booked. Sometimes I just give myself a little mental breather in between so that I can just, it's almost like I try to let go, so I create a new space and I'm fresh for the new person that comes in, so I can be fully present for that, so that I'm not taking baggage with me. It's a bit like going from home to work, and those sorts of movements that you have, maybe just have a tiny little breather in between. So what we know about daily habits is if you can cue it with something else, so if you can link it to something else, like when you put the kettle on, when you get in your car, between patients, maybe when you're looking at the record card or getting ready for the next appointment. I also use it when I'm doing, so I do my own visual field tests, so I'll use it when I'm doing visual field tests with patients, and I use that time just to sort of calm down and just use it to my advantage. And just those tiny little breaks through the day make a difference. So let's look at a couple of the mental wellbeing strategies, and I've listed a few here which we're going to look at. We're going to look at mindset, which is really the way you think. We're going to look at the learning zone model, which is talking about when we feel uncomfortable, when we're out of our comfort zone, there's an opportunity to learn and to grow. And if we think about it that way, then it puts a more positive reframe on what's happening. What are the most useful beliefs that we can be thinking about at this point in time? What can we control, which is the antidote to anxiety, and what can we use to boost our moods? So growth mindset was a concept that has been talked about by Carol Dweck, who's a Stanford psychologist. And she talks about mindset as being either fixed or a growth mindset. And fixed mindset is where we believe that intelligence, ability, those things are fixed and that they can't be influenced. So you get your qualification, where you are is where you're always going to be, and that it can't be influenced. And people with a fixed mindset are afraid to try new things or make mistakes because they feel like that there's a failure or that they're not good enough, because they believe that what they've got is all that they're ever going to have. Whereas people with a growth mindset embrace change, and they look at challenges as an opportunity to grow, and they know that with effort they can have new skills and abilities and develop. So if we look at the differences between fixed and growth mindset, one looks at the opportunities and doesn't look at failure as a negative, but looks at feedback of how we can improve, whereas a fixed mindset takes it personally about I'm not good enough, or they get frustrated and they'll give up because they feel like they're never going to be able to do it. And obviously a growth mindset is a very healthy mindset to have in terms of well-being. So if we just look at one of the concepts, which I love, because I think as health professionals, we certainly are more likely to suffer from stress. We're problem solvers. We're always looking for ways that we can fix things. And we tend to be perfectionists as well. And I know that's something that I've really worked on, moving away from that feeling of perfectionism, because it creates so much pressure for yourself. And so what about we focus on progress, not perfection? Because perfectionism keeps you stuck in a cycle of worry, because if you can't work out how to do something perfectly, you actually won't even start. So you often have all these things that you want to do on projects and you never ever get anything happening. And then that creates stress, because then you judge yourself for not being able to get started and get these things done. So really focus on what's one small step I can take. And micro steps is a very positive way to think about how can I take the next small step to get me from where I am to where I want to be. And think about there's no failure, there's just feedback. So apart from growth mindset, we look at this learning zone model. And the learning zone model is saying, well, when you're pushed out of your comfort zone, you feel fear. But that's okay, because from fear, you'll move into learning phase. And then you'll go into a growth phase where you've mastered things. So sometimes it's helpful to look at where am I now in this learning zone model? Where is my team and where are my patients? Because it helps you to work out where people are so that you know how you can approach things. So that's why it's important, and to look for growth opportunities. So our brains were designed to learn. Think about being a child, natural curiosity. It's normal to feel uncomfortable as you learn, but you may have seen these graphics before, and you don't need to worry about all the words, but just understand. So where we start, that zone, the small dark circle, is where the comfort zone has been you've been pushed out of. You move into fear, and then you move along to learning, and then you move to growth. And growth is where you start to see where the opportunities are and the gifts and the silver linings out of what has happened. And all of us can look at the COVID situation and probably think of some positives that have come of it, as well as some of the challenges that we've had. So useful beliefs is another mental wellbeing strategy that you can use. And useful beliefs empower you and give you a choice or control when you're in a situation. And remember that control is the antidote to anxiety. So positive thinking is where you tell yourself, oh, I'm going to feel positive, or I'm going to feel like, oh, everything's fine, when it's not. So it actually doesn't really work very well. So useful beliefs is about framing your challenges and then creating an action plan. So you say, okay, well, this disaster is the worst thing that I've ever experienced with my business. And that's true. So then from there you say, so what is the most useful thing to move me, say, from 0 to 1? So what's a micro step that I can use to get me from where I am, which is the worst thing that's ever happened, to step 1 of where I want to go? So not thinking and knowing everything or where you need to go next, but what is a useful strategy that I can use so that you have a choice. So remember, useful beliefs is saying, well, in this situation, what's the most useful way I can think about this to reduce and alleviate some of that stress and anxiety. Chris Helder wrote a book on useful beliefs and also has a TED talk about useful beliefs. But really, this is the concept behind it is, okay, this is happening. So how do we move from the next step? Or if you're at, step 4, how do I move from 4 to 5? What's the smallest thing I can do? Now, one of the resources I've put on the website is just a really simple one, which we call our circle of control. So you can do this simply. You get a piece of paper, you put a horizontal line in the middle, and at the top you put what is in my control, and at the bottom you put what is not in my control. Or you just draw a circle like the diagram, and in the middle you have a worry or things that are going on. Put the things that you can control in the middle, and put the things that you can't control outside that, and focus on what you can control. Because remember, control is the antidote to anxiety. control gives you a feeling that you have a choice and that you're empowered to do something. And it moves you from feeling uncertain and fearful and threatened to being the master of your destiny, that you can do something. So the other powerful, really powerful mood boosters that have been looked at and are all evidence-based and scientifically backed are social connection and gratitude. So social connection, we have areas in the brain that if you feel lonely or isolated, actually create physical pain in the body. So it's actually physically painful for us when we feel lonely or isolated, which has been a bit of a challenge during the COVID time. And there's a reason that we have these areas in the brain, and it's because from primitive and survival times that if we weren't part of a group and we weren't part of the tribe, then we wouldn't survive. So our survival in primitive terms is related to us being connected socially to other people. Otherwise, we were going to be on the outer and didn't have a great sense of survival. So we're really hardwired for social connection. So it's really important to keep up connections with friends and family in whichever way you can during this time, especially if you are on your own. And gratitude is about present moment awareness. So the resource I've given you on gratitude on the website is all scientifically backed research. And Martin Seligman, the positive psychology grandfather, we call him, has a technique of gratitude called What Went Well. And it's just 3 things you think about. What went well today and why? And if you do these things on a regular basis, what happens is you actually start to look for the positive. You start to look for the things that you're grateful for rather than focusing on the negative. So last poll, just quickly before we finish, is there an idea from today that you feel you could use or put into practice to improve your physical or mental well-being? So just a yes, a no, or a maybe. And if you can, just put the idea in the chat box. So after you've voted yes, no, or maybe, just put a quick word about what it is. Is it gratitude? Is it social connection? Is it growth mindset? Is it physical well-being? Is it useful beliefs? Just pop what that term is, and it's anonymous. Just pop it in there and it'll give us good feedback to see what the things are that are going to be most helpful for you to put into place. And remember, only 10 minutes. Start today, start tomorrow, but just start where you are. Great. So that's people have got 86% of people have got something that they could take away from today and put into practice. And what I'd say to you is do it as quickly as possible, because again, all the evidence shows that the longer you wait for to put something into place, the less likely it is that you're going to do it, because your motivation will start to wane. So I'd like to just wrap up and just recap to say well-being is individual and it's multifaceted, and you can improve well-being and you can start using any of these evidence-based practices with as little as 10 minutes a day. You need to do them consistently, because remember, doing it once is not going to be enough to build up these resources and reserves. And you know, you can't control everything that happens, but you can control how you respond with your thoughts and with your behaviours. So just going back to a feeling of control will help you to take the next step. And I love this thought, which is, we all know what to do, but we're not necessarily doing it. And I'm as guilty as anybody. If I know what I should be doing, and there's the judgment, but I don't always do it. And it seems like there's this massive chasm, that we have to jump, but there isn't. So there's just a little micro step. How do I get a little bit further along? And that's what I want you to take away from today. So we'll open to questions now. I've tried to wrap up on time. I went a little bit over time yesterday. So Simon, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you for such a well-prepared presentation, and obviously a lot of content there that was covered as well. So we're just going to go to a couple of questions from the audience. Somebody's saying, are there any good apps that you would recommend for meditation and mindfulness, Lisa?
Look, I think apps are a great idea, and they make it that it's with you all the time, your phone, that you can do things easily. I think the 2 best apps are probably Calm, C-A-L-M, My favourite though is called Insight Timer, and it's INSIGHT. Yep. So the thing I love about Insight Timer is it has guided meditation, it has music, so if you've only got 2 minutes or 5 minutes, you can click on the app and straight away you've got something that you can do just in 2 minutes. So if you're in the car, you're waiting, if you're in between, you've got it at your fingertips. Plus there's all these courses and things you can do on the paid version, and it's free.
Wonderful, yeah, and I can second Insight Timer. We didn't plan this, by the way, Lisa and I, but I can also recommend Insight Timer if you've got kids you're trying to put to sleep. It works like a charm. So
yes.
Some really good mindfulness for kids there as well. So definitely get onto Insight Timer. Somebody's saying this: I don't seem to have any time with a young family and work. That sounds familiar. I don't have any time alone. What do you suggest?
Oh, I feel for you. You know, I've been through it. So I'd suggest, if you can, even just 10 minutes in the morning, early on your own, just even if it's a walk, or just sit down, have a cup of tea, or just go outside during the day if you can, sit down, just look at the trees, go outside, just do something that just allows you just to even do the breathing, 2 minutes of breathing somewhere, but just do small little pockets like that. So just grab whatever you can, pop your earphones in, listen to something on Insight Timer.
Carve out some time. I think the message there. Someone said, no, you did bring up being sort of burnt out, and that's kind of been a bit of a buzzword pre-COVID, and particularly during COVID. How does somebody know when they're burnt out, as opposed to just this is just normal and you've just got to soldier on?
Yeah, look, it's a good question, because, you know, I have said about looking at anxiety and stress and looking at sort of some of the positives of it. But, we have to be mindful that you can be in burnout. And burnout is really where the stress has been going on for a long time and you're feeling actually empty and exhausted. And one of the key signs is you actually don't see any sign that you could have a positive change from where you are now. So you feel really like you're in a deep hole and that there's no way out. So the signs are you go off that slippery slope sometimes very quickly. So if you think that you're approaching that, please, there's so many places, professional help, Beyond Blue, look at the resources on Black Dog Institute. There's so many things out there for free, but please seek help if you need it, because sometimes that's what you need, just to help you with some things that you can put into place.
That's good advice. And of course, if you don't know who to approach, you're more than welcome to ring the Optometry Australia help desk, and we can always guide you and show you what resources are out there and support you again. So always, if you're not sure who to reach out to, please feel free to use Optometry Australia as a starting point. We can connect you on. Thank you, Lisa, for your preparation and for your eloquent delivery. And we look forward to hearing from you again, not in a too distant future, with some more topics in this area. So thank you again for your time. For everybody on the line, we thank you for joining us and for staying with us. You will be given the extra 1 non-clinical point for today. So look out for that in your member portal in the coming days. So otherwise, stay safe, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.